Welcome to Asian Ghost Stories, where we delve into chilling tales that blur the line between the living and the dead. Tonight, we unravel the eerie story of a crying child beyond a fence and a family haunted by an unrelenting spirit. Several years ago, a man named Oot purchased a plot of land to cultivate fruit trees. This piece of land had once been an abandoned rice field with a wide, murky canal running alongside it. The sky above the property often seemed perpetually overcast, casting a gray pall over the canal and surrounding reeds. At dusk, the area took on an unsettling stillness, broken only by the occasional croak of frogs or the distant rustle of wind through the tall grass. The shadows from the dense reeds lining the canal seemed to stretch unnaturally, as if reaching toward the barbed wire fence. After acquiring the property, Oot transformed it, enclosing it with a sturdy barbed wire fence and building a small house where he could stay during his visits. The landscape around the property was barren yet hauntingly picturesque. Thin wisps of fog clung to the ground in the early morning, while crows cawed from the gnarled branches of distant trees. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and decay, especially near the canal, where stagnant water reflected the brooding sky like a cracked mirror. The canal, lined with dense reeds, was known among locals as a place children avoided due to its murky waters and rumors of strange echoes at night. Oot dismissed these stories as superstition, focusing instead on turning the land into a thriving orchard. The plot was far from his home, so he only came to tend to it on weekends, leaving his wife and child behind during the week. One evening, after a long day of work on the farm, Oot prepared to rest. As he sat down to eat dinner, a faint but unmistakable sound reached his ears, the cry of a child. Startled, he set down his bowl and listened intently. The sound seemed to emanate from the canal just beyond the fence. His pulse quickened as he recalled stories villagers had shared about hearing cries from the canal at night. Oot shook off the unease, reasoning it could be a lost child from a nearby farm. Concerned, he grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound. As he approached the fence, the crying grew louder. The sound carried a chilling edge, like the wind slicing through hollow reeds. The moonlight barely illuminated the surroundings, and Oot's flashlight cast long trembling shadows that seemed to reach out toward him. The reeds by the canal rustled softly, though there was no wind, adding to the suffocating tension. The flashlight beam cut through the oppressive darkness, illuminating the twisting reeds that swayed despite the still air. The faint sound of water lapping against the canal's edge added to the eerie atmosphere, making each step heavier with apprehension. He shone his flashlight towards the canal and saw a small figure hunched by the fence, its back turned to him. It was a child, their shoulders shaking as they sobbed into their hands. "Hey there, little one," Oot called out. "What are you doing out here? It's late. Where's your family?" The child did not respond immediately, continuing to cry softly. Finally, in a trembling voice, the child replied, "I'm hungry. I haven't eaten anything." Feeling a pang of sympathy, Oot hurried back to his house, returning with some boiled eggs. He handed them through the gaps in the fence, urging the child to eat and go home. The child grabbed the eggs with small trembling hands, but their face remained hidden in the shadows. After thanking him in a soft voice, the child disappeared into the night. Time passed, and Oot became busier with his work on the farm. Eventually, his wife and young son Bo moved to the property to help him with daily tasks. Bo, a lively and curious child, often wandered around the fenced property, finding joy in the simplest things. However, one day, as Oot worked in the orchard, he noticed Bo standing by the fence, staring intently at something beyond it. "Who are you talking to, Bo?" Oot asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "My friend," Bo replied cheerfully, pointing beyond the fence. Oot walked over, but he saw nothing but the overgrown grass and the stagnant canal. The canal surface, usually still, seemed to ripple faintly, as though disturbed by an unseen force. The air around it was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, intensifying the unease settling in Oot's chest. "There's no one there," Oot said. Bo simply giggled and continued playing, as if his invisible friend were still present. At first, Oot dismissed it as a child's imagination, but over the following days, Bo's behavior grew stranger. He spent hours by the fence, talking and laughing as if someone were with him. He even started taking snacks, especially boiled eggs, to the fence, leaving them on the ground. One evening, Bo's mother found him sitting by the fence, holding a plate of eggs. The sky was a deep, brooding purple, and the faint glow of fireflies danced above the darkened canal. The sound of cicadas had faded into silence, leaving an almost unnatural quiet that seemed to amplify the tension in the air. "Who are you giving those to?" she asked. "My friend," Bo said matter-of-factly. "He likes eggs, just like me." Chilled by her son's answer, she told Oot about the incident. Oot, recalling his own experience with the crying child, began to feel uneasy. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to watch Bo closely. One afternoon, as Bo placed the eggs on the ground, Oot noticed movement beyond the fence. His heart pounded as he saw a small figure crouching in the shadows, reaching for the eggs. It was the same child he had seen months ago. Oot shouted, "Who are you? Why are you here?" His voice cracked with fear, and he felt his knees grow weak. The oppressive silence that followed seemed to thicken the air around him, making it harder to breathe. The darkness beyond the fence seemed alive, pressing in on him as the figure began to turn slowly, almost deliberately. His voice wavered, and he gripped the fence tightly, his knuckles white. The figure froze, then slowly turned its head. The moment stretched unbearably, each second heavy with dread. Oot's flashlight trembled in his hand as the beam revealed the ghastly contours of its face. The eyes seemed to lock onto his, though they held no life, only a void that seemed to pull at his very soul. His breath quickened, and a cold sweat ran down his back as he stumbled a step away from the fence. The face that met Oot's gaze was horrifying. Sunken eyes that seemed to stare into nothingness, framed by hollow dark circles. The skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tightly over sharp cheekbones, and streaked with dried blood that ran from its temple to its chin. Its lips were cracked, and a faint gurgling sound escaped from its mouth, as if struggling to breathe. The body was thin, emaciated, with bony limbs and tattered clothing that clung to its skeletal frame. Its arms hung limply, the fingers dirt-encrusted, claw-like. Frightened, Oot consulted his neighbors, who suggested seeking help from a local spiritual master, Mr. Bay. The master was known for his ability to communicate with spirits and resolve supernatural disturbances. Oot and Bo brought offerings to Mr. Bay's home. The moment Mr. Bay saw Bo, he grew serious. "The child's spirit has attached itself to your son," Mr. Bay said. "It's seeking attention, but its presence will only bring harm if left unchecked." Mr. Bay performed a ritual to summon the spirit. The air in the room grew icy, and the shadows cast by the flickering candlelight seemed to writhe and stretch across the walls. A faint dripping sound echoed, though no source of water was visible. The room seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, the faint scent of mold and iron filling their noses. The shadows seemed alive, growing longer with each chant, forming shapes that resembled clawed hands reaching toward Bo. Suddenly, Bo let out a blood-curdling scream, his small body convulsing violently. The scream shifted into a guttural moan that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Through broken, anguished words, the spirit recounted its tragic story. "I was beaten. I was drowned. I only wanted food. The farmer, he accused me of stealing." The chilling confession filled the room with an oppressive sadness. Mr. Bay's voice grew louder, his chants more forceful as he worked to calm the spirit and guide it toward release. The room shook slightly, a low rumble emanating from the floor. Then, as quickly as it began, the spirit's hold on Bo seemed to break. The boy collapsed into his mother's arms, unconscious but unharmed. The oppressive energy in the room dissipated, replaced by a quiet stillness. Following the ritual, Mr. Bay instructed Oot to locate the spirit's resting place. "The child's remains must be properly buried with prayers and offerings," he said, "or the spirit's unrest will continue." Oot and the villagers gathered at the canal the next morning, armed with tools to search for the grave. The canal's reeds swayed ominously despite the still air, and an unnatural chill seemed to hang over the area. The water itself appeared darker than usual, as though absorbing the sorrow of the land. Birds, which normally flocked nearby, were eerily absent, leaving only the sound of their own movements and the occasional drip of water breaking the silence. Hours of digging near the water's edge unearthed a small, shallow grave. Wrapped in a tattered piece of cloth were the skeletal remains of a child, its fragile bones a poignant reminder of a life cut tragically short. The sight sent shivers through the group, the somber realization of the child's fate settling heavily upon them. The villagers fell silent, their faces pale as they processed the sight before them. Oot felt a lump rise in his throat, guilt gnawing at him for not acting sooner. His hands trembled as he turned to Mr. Bay, who nodded solemnly. "We will give the child the peace he deserves," the spiritual master said, his voice firm yet tinged with sorrow. A proper burial was arranged that very evening. Villagers brought offerings of rice, fruit, and boiled eggs, leaving them at the new grave. Prayers were chanted, and incense sticks burned, their fragrant smoke rising into the twilight sky. Children, curious but respectful, peeked from behind their parents as the community came together to honor the lost soul. As the final prayers were spoken, a gentle breeze swept through the crowd, carrying with it the faint, ghostly sound of a child's laughter. Many swore they felt a warmth pass over them, as though the spirit was thanking them for their kindness. Despite the warmth, an eerie stillness lingered around the grave. Oot noticed the reeds near the canal swaying, though no wind could be felt. Mr. Bay approached the grave and placed a protective talisman near it. "This will keep the spirit at rest," he said, his tone cautious. "But remember, spirits remember kindness as well as cruelty. Continue to honor this site." In the days that followed, life on Oot's farm returned to normal. The strange occurrences ceased, and Bo no longer spoke of his friend by the fence. Oot built a small shrine near the canal, dedicating it to the child's memory. The shrine was modest, with a wooden platform for offerings and a carved figure of a child's silhouette to symbolize the lost boy. Villagers began to visit the shrine regularly, leaving offerings and prayers. They believed the child's spirit, now at peace, watched over the canal and the village, offering protection. The canal, once a source of fear and unease, became a place of quiet reflection. Families would bring their children to the shrine to teach them about respect for life and the spirits that linger between worlds. The shrine became adorned with bright flowers, ribbons, and small toys left by children who felt a connection to the story. Villagers still spoke of the crying child, passing the story down to their children as a cautionary tale about kindness and respect for the departed. Years later, Oot often visited the shrine, bringing fresh flowers and lighting incense. As he grew older, the shrine became a place of solace for him. He would sit quietly by the canal, watching the water flow gently past and listening to the rustle of reeds in the breeze. He felt a sense of peace, knowing he had helped bring closure to a restless soul. On quiet nights, some claimed to hear faint humming near the shrine, as though the child's soul, finally at peace, was singing a lullaby to the reeds swaying in the breeze. Others spoke of seeing a small figure, glowing faintly, walking along the canal's edge. These sightings were never frightening but rather comforting, as though the boy's spirit had truly become a guardian of the land. One stormy evening, as the winds howled and rain lashed against the ground, a bolt of lightning struck near the canal. Villagers rushed out the next morning to check the shrine, fearing it had been damaged. To their surprise, the shrine remained untouched, its offerings still in place, and the talisman glowing faintly as though imbued with renewed energy. Mr. Bay, upon hearing this, remarked, "The spirit has accepted its place here. It will protect those who honor it." Over time, the shrine grew into a symbol of the village's history and resilience. Festivals and ceremonies began to incorporate visits to the shrine, with villagers lighting lanterns and setting them afloat on the canal in remembrance of lost loved ones. The child story, once a haunting tale of tragedy, transformed into one of redemption and the enduring bond between the living and the dead. Oot's family continued to care for the shrine even after his passing, ensuring its legacy endured. Bo, now grown, often brought his own children to the canal, telling them the story of the crying child and the importance of compassion. The shrine became a bridge between generations, a place where the past and present intertwined. Thank you for joining us on this extended journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe to Asian Ghost Stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for more eerie tales from the unseen world.